Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on Module 2 today, and it'll be a little bit different focus, as I mentioned, in that we're not going to do any heavy lecture stuff. We're just going to do coding and work through exercises. I did want to start by working through the Microsoft tutorial that's listed here in Module 2 called Branches and Loops, which I happen to have open here. So if you click that link, you end up in this spot. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the begin button. And this puts us into their kind of like online coding environment, which is pretty neat. And I think I showed you guys this in the past. This is a cool tool. So I can write code here and execute it and see the console output down here. All right. Our goal is to go through steps 1 and 2 of this. So it's basically the first couple of pages, but you are welcome if you wish to plow forward and do more of their examples and really explore this site in detail. They have a lot of really cool tutorials relative to a lot of different coding styles that they do. And remember, C# is Microsoft's baby, right? This is like their language. And this is what they use internally to do all their development, or most of their development, but especially for the Windows platform and for the Windows operating system. So, you know, even though this is very similar to the other C style languages, it does have its own unique quirks. And those of you that know how to code already are kind of seeing that, right? And I'm always reminded of it every time I come back to it. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at their instruction set here. And it says, run the following code in the interactive window, select the enter focus mode button, and then type the following code in the interactive window and select run. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click. And I can see right now I'm in focus mode because mine says exit focus mode, right? So if yours doesn't say that and you have a button that says select, you want to do that. What I think would be ideal for all of you is if you can also do the tutorial, if you're two screening in particular, just so you get a feel. If you're not double screened and you don't want to be flipping back and forth, maybe you can just watch. I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to go ahead and do the paste, and they want us to go ahead and hit the run. And, you know, maybe it would be wise at this point, aside from maybe going in a click or two so we can see it, is to maybe analyze what's this is going to do first. So, and if you're not in the habit of doing that, I always like to do that before I run code. Like, what is this going to do, right? At least make a guess, right? So we're setting up a couple of integers and assigning them values. Then we're running an if statement asking if we add those integers together, are they greater than 10, which we can see they are. So what should happen is the console should output the answer is greater than 10. Right, let's give that a shot. All right. All right, so there's the example of just the real basic if statement. Once again, I do want you to notice what they're doing here, though, and I'm not always very comfortable with this, and I think I mentioned that in the lecture, is they're using the approach that since it's a simple if statement, they are not using curly brackets. You guys remember what my recommendation was? Yeah, always use curly brackets, you know, because what'll happen is you'll get into that situation where you're going to do something like this and type in another line of code. And, you know, I'll just go ahead and show you, you know. And I like how their IntelliSense actually works really well in the cloud. That's pretty impressive. And so this, it will print no matter what, because even though it looks like it's inside the if statement, it actually is not. So if I do what they say here, which is change B to 3, and I'll just do that manually, right? I don't need to copy paste that and run this. This will now be false, right? So watch what happens. Right? Looks like it's in the if statement, but it's not. It really needs to be at the margin. Remember, the indenting in this language is only for our eyes. Fair warning to anybody going to study Python coming up, right? And I know there's some of you that are going to do that. Python uses indenting to identify blocks of code. For me, always the safe bet on this is to do the curly brackets no matter what. That's my recommendation, right? If you're clear on what you're doing, go ahead and do it. But I can just tell you from experience, what would always happen to me is I would forget and type the code in there going, what's going on? I can't figure it out. I looked at this all day, you know, you get into those mindsets. But if you follow simple basic practices, then, you know, you're never going to get into that situation. That's the recommendation. All right. All right. I think that this is kind of showing you the basics. I think we already kind of got pretty much of this last time, but we are looking for this to evaluate as a Boolean. Let's go to step 2 and check out the next one. Right. So now they're going to show us the if else. And once again, I'll copy all that code, drop it in, and then we'll just give it a run. Let's predict though first. Here it is. 5 and 3 is 8, which is less than 10. So the else statement should print. Can we agree on that? I think so, right? Seems pretty logical. Okay, it's not greater than 10. So that it seems to be working. Let's test it by changing one of these so that it goes over 10. All right, so it seems to be working just fine. Same thing they're doing here. No curly brackets, really strong suggestion. Put them in anyhow. You know, that's a lesson well learned by many programmers. Doesn't maybe look as nice as or as concise, frankly, but you know, hey, I'd rather have working code than pretty code. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. Right, so this is my recommendation. Put those curly brackets in. And then, you know, think about it this way as well. If you have the curly brackets in, then you're like, hey, I want to add a couple more statements here. Well, you're all set to go. You don't have to add them later. That's the other advantage of this approach. The other thing that I'll have you think about here is, does it matter if this statement is maybe here? Is a curly bracket? Is that okay? Well, I added a curly bracket. That is not okay. But could I do it like this? Here's my answer. Let's try it. See if this would work. So right now it'll go over 11, so it should output the first answer, right? Okay, let's run it. Let's clear. Oh, Control Z. No. Okay. All right. Yeah, right. Thanks, Microsoft. Right. I'll just blame Microsoft. I'm glad you're getting a kick out of it, John. I'm not getting quite so much of a kick out of it if you're not noticing. But, you know,
I'm
it's okay.
just glad you're understanding our world too.
Well, you know what? Your world is my world. I'm just welcoming you to it. You know what? And I'll tell you what, having kind of a lighthearted attitude about it actually helps a lot. And I'm not being, you know, a kidster about that. You know, I think like a lot of the people that I've enjoyed working with professionally are ones that would find a reason to laugh at just about every situation, right? Keeping in mind, most often coding, you tend to fail when you succeed, but when you do succeed, it sure makes you feel good. So this one's going to hit which answer? Right, be mindful. Should hit the else.
Yes.
So notice, even though I squeezed it all down, and this is just proof, the indenting is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. If you guys wish, you guys can keep stepping through this example. This is just really good reinforcement in my mind. And what I do like a lot about it is that you can actually work with the stuff, play with all the different aspects of it, move it around, run it, check it. You know, you're not like like saving it and worrying about all that. I think this is a really nice environment, and kudos to Microsoft for a nice job on it, I think. All right, so let's go ahead and get out of that mode. And now that we've done that, there are a couple things on W3 Schools. These are reference things, but you guys already know W3 Schools also has that feature, right? Where if you guys want to run code and try it, they have their little try it now or whatever they call it, editors. And I encourage you real strongly to remember that that is always there. whenever you run into a coding problem, you're looking up an answer, right? Like, how do I blank, blank, blank? Just go to W3 schools. Really, they offer the answers in such nice, concise format with examples where you can try what you're working on right in their environment. Hey, let's go for it. That's a really good idea. I like it. All right. Now I'm going to bop back over to the module and I'm going to look at the lab exercise. And this is the one I want to code through together. There is basically an instruction here. So let's read the instruction and see what we make of this. All right. So it says, you've been asked to create a program that converts units of volume in the kitchen. Ask the user to enter an amount in milliliters and then select the units they want to convert to. Teaspoons, tablespoons, cups, and quarts. All right, this is a wonderful problem. If you ever buy any European food products and you look at the label, or Oriental, even better, right? Because they're poorly translated typically. And then they say, add 250 milliliters of water. Like, what the heck is that, right? Like, we don't know. And by the way, that's about a cup. But if you don't know that, I mean, for people that use, metric for their measurements all the time, it's like, hey, whatever, right? The British still kind of use the English system, but pretty much the rest of the world uses metric. We're still the anomaly. And you know what? They should all switch to our system, right? No, I'm kidding. Right, because we have to deal with fractions and stuff. All right, so after your program runs, the console should look similar to the following example. The exact output will vary depending on what the user inputs. So we're going to ask the user to input, and then notice what's going to happen here is we're going to enter an amount in milliliters. So we're going to prompt the user with this, and then they're going to type this and press enter, right? And then they will also get this screen that pops up that's going to ask them, 1, 2, 3, or 4, choose your conversion type. So this will appear on the screen. Right? It's kind of like a primitive menu. So here's like our first kind of like user interface, if you will, where we're giving people more than one choice. The user types 3, and then we need to convert that milliliters to the number of cups. Okay. Can I just raise a red flag right away? So this is the first thing that comes into my head is like, how many milliliters are in a cup? Right. You guys notice it doesn't say so anything here about it, right? And if you know what, if we were using a proper textbook, this is one of those goofy things that they would have a little chart or a listing of like, by the way, there's this many milliliters in a cup, but you know what, we have at our fingertips what? Google, right? There's this thing called Google, and we want to convert from what to what. Let me see, I can't even type it correctly. What are we converting? Milliliters to cups. And you see, before I even like finished typing, did you guys see what happened? It was already in the search bar, like what the conversion amount is. So 1 milliliter equals oh yeah, that looks really messy. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about it, right? Um, maybe if I put in, how about I switch things around? What if I say how many milliliters are in a cup? Maybe that's better. Okay, not a clean conversion once again. So, but if somebody asks, hey, and this is why Europeans use 250, by the way. Technically, 235 is really close to a cup, like a US cup, but the Europeans always go up to 250, a little more. How much milk do you put in your mashed potatoes? A little extra, right? And same with butter, usually. So would this be an acceptable conversion here? Could we say there's 236.6, maybe? Could we round it? Or should we just say 237 milliliters in a cup? What do you guys think?
I think it depends.
What's that, John?
I think it depends.
Okay, you know what? You always hit on my favorite answer, right? And it must
If,
must be
if
an
this,
old guy thing, right? Like,
if this was money, you care about the pennies.
well,
If in baking, yeah, it's probably close enough.
okay. And that's really kind of an interesting perspective. Now, if anybody, does anybody here do baking?
Yeah.
Like you're like into making cookies or breads or anything like that? You know, John, and all right, it's kind of interesting, right? Because somebody who's really into baking will tell you, no, no, it matters. That little bit matters, right? Now, if I'm making mac and cheese, it doesn't matter, right? If I'm making, you know, that special birthday cake, maybe it does matter. So I'm going to say that we want to get as close to precision as possible, right? You know, how significant is 0.58? I don't know. I mean, that might be like a couple drops, you know, of water, you know, or liquid, or, you know, a pinch of dry ingredient. I'm going to say, for the sake of kind of getting it as close as we can, I think that we could use this exact value. I think that would be okay. Or I think we could go to like 0.6. I guess you could go to 237 and kind of be okay. All right. So I think I'm going to go with 236.6 works for me. That's what I'm going to use as a value. So let's do this. I'm going to bring up Visual Studio. Yeah, let's go ahead and make a new project. Make a console app. Uh, by the way, Lena, I installed Visual Studio on my Mac today. I didn't get a chance to play with it yet, but I've kind of enthused to try it and do some of these apps on that. So maybe one of these sessions will actually teach on that machine. Um, so let's just call this. What should we call this? Does it tell us what to call it? Module 2 Lab, perhaps. Do you guys have a naming convention for how you name these things?
I literally just name it that. It just makes it easier to find.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, Sebastian. Absolutely. Just name it what it is. It's, mod 2 lab would probably be fine. If you want to name it as to what it does, you could also do like M2 lab, uh, milliliter convert or something like that. Might not be a bad name. So let's call it mod 2 lab ML convert. That's what I'm going to call it. You call it whatever you want. Your choice. Go ahead and click create. Now I'll have an environment to code in. But see, what I want to do right away, once again, this is how my coding brain works, is I want to get that information typed in here so I don't have to flip back and forth to Google. So I can say 230, what was that again? Right. I already forgot. I said, you know what, let's just copy that exact. Now what happened? Did you see that? That was really weird, I thought, because the precision was off. All right, so 236.588. Okay. And you know what? Let's gather all the information like that. And see, that part is not really explained in the lab. But you know what, folks? That's often how it goes, right? So like sometimes, if you're working on a project, hopefully people give you the formulas, but otherwise sometimes you do have to look them up. And that's, you guys see what's happening here? I think this is really fascinating because I flipped away and came back to this tab with the conversion, and now the conversion is not precise. I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do a thing. I think this is really fascinating, but it shows you that it's a little bit off, right? But 0.99999 is pretty darn close to, one. So, all right. What's the other conversions we have to do? Well, there's teaspoons, tablespoons, we got cups and quarts. Okay, so let's look that up. Milliliters to US tablespoon. And I think it's interesting because there's an imperial one, which is the British one, which is different than ours. Very strange, by the way. And why don't we do it like this once again? Let's set this to 1. And then this is our milliliters to tablespoon. Interesting, it did that again. Okay, so it shows you that the precision is so high, you know, that it's strange. Tablespoon. Then let's switch over to teaspoon. And then finally, it's the last one, quarts. And then I'm going to be ever so kind to you guys right now. Paste this all in the chat, like you guys are already typing it in. So sometimes you snooze and you win. Let's see. Sometimes you say snooze, you lose, right? But here in this case, if you were snoozing, you didn't have to type a darn thing. And there's all the numbers, right? And what we choose to do with them now is kind of on us. You notice that the precision varies, right? So I think what we'll have to come up with is an agreed upon, what are we rounding this to that's reasonable? That's kind of my mindset. So I think for me, this could probably be a 0.6. That could be a 0.8. That could just stay a 0.9. And that can be a 0.4. All right, so can we do that? So I'm going to like tweak all of mine to do that. And I think that's close enough. This is a 0.6. We'll call that a 0.8. We'll call this a 0.9. This a 0.4. Okay. I think that's reasonable because now all of these have the same level of precision, right? In terms of milliliters. And, you know, maybe it's horseshoes and hand grenades, you know, accuracy is not that important. As long as you're within a reasonable amount. All right. We need to do some coding now, right? We are going to start with a prompt, correct? So should I do a read or a read line?
I think you should start with a console right line or console right, enter amount and MF.
Ah, okay, great. Victor, that shows me you've been working on your stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're on point. So what are we supposed to prompt? You know what? The first prompt is given to us right here. So hey, why not just, you know, copy paste? Including the space after, why not, right? All right. Now, how do I capture it? And am I doing this in the right direction? Because what are we being asked to input? Milliliters, right? And then they're going to select from cups. Are these ratios going to work for us? You know, we didn't even talk about that. Are these, you know, here we are, not pseudo coding or flow charting before we're coding. We're just coding. So like right away, I'm like kind of breaking like the cardinal rule of coding. You guys might not be thinking about this, but I didn't even think about how the equations work. And here I am coding, right? epic fail, by the way, that I would, not recommend to proceed in that fashion. Okay, I can set up all the prompts, but the math I'm going to have to be really careful on, I think. So let's do the prompts and capture all the information. Now, if we're going to capture this information, what would be a good name for the thing that we're capturing? What are they entering?
The name
Milliliters?
MIML.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we just call it ML, right? And how do we expect them to be entering? Is it going to be like a floating point number? Is it going to be an integer? What's the assumption? If you ask somebody to enter milliliters, what do you assume they're going to type?
Just the number.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think they're going to go like 75.3. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're just going to say 75 milliliters, right? So that sounds like what kind of number?
Integer.
Integer. However, all right, so here's the however. If we're going to do math and conversions with it, all the numbers that we've grabbed up here are decimal numbers, or we probably make them doubles, right? Think about it. So can we do math with an integer and a double? Could I ask the user for a whole number and then store it in a double? Yes, right? And that gives me better precision right off the bat, and I don't have to worry about converting it later to do the math. So this is how my brain is thinking on it. All right, so if I'm going to set up a variable to hold this, do I do like double? And can we just call it ML? Is ML enough? All right, and I probably want to assign it to something. How do we do the read line here? Somebody coach me.
The read line. Line is what you're talking about.
Yeah. This,
It'd be
I
read
need-
line parentheses semicolon. Yeah, console dot read line.
Thank you. Letting the IntelliSense sort of take over a little bit here. Do I need to put anything inside the parentheses?
As far as I know, no.
Basically, we're just setting it up so that like whatever they're capturing is going to be stored. Now, why is it underlining? Let's look at the error. Right. Notice what it's expecting. String question mark. We talked about this last time, right? So it's going to come in as a string. I could allow it to just come in as a string and then convert later, or I could also convert now, right? So do you guys remember how to do the conversion?
Yeah, you put convert that to double, then in parentheses the console.read line.
Yeah. And do you notice what Visual Studio did? I didn't even like type this in. I hadn't finished typing it in. It kind of did it for me, and I'm okay with that, by the way. I like the fact that it kind of intelligently grabbed what I needed and just did it. But yes. So now the error goes away. So we have our first prompt is in place. And so we're going to capture the program, or capture the value that they type in. It's going to be converted to double and it's ready to roll. What if I want to do a write line? And why would I do a blank write line? Well, when I look at
Creates
the
a space.
sample program run, there's a blank line there, right? Now I could also recognize that all of this stuff is going to get output each on its own line, correct? And this is just text. There's nothing fancy about this at all. So I'm going to just take the console write line. There's really how many entries here? 4 that follow. And then once again, folks, if you want to make it look exactly like this, and in fact, I know, and I already know that I kind of blew it here, right? because I wanted to leave a blank one. So I wanted to leave one up here. Or, and just remember this, I could use an escape sequence. So I could go \n on this line if I wish. Now, I'll tell you what, we'll experiment with that. Let's see what it looks like first. Let's get all of these in here. And there is kind of this technique in programming. So like, and we should talk about this, right? So I was kind of saying, hey, you know, we're working on this issue here. And I didn't even like try to work out the math in advance. Big mistake, by the way. And here I am like coding out the interface. But that is an approach too. So some people often will code out the interface first and then add the logic. And that's much more common when you do graphical programming. And this isn't graphical programming at all, but we are putting together basically a couple of prompts and a menu, and those are going to be whatever they're going to be. And it doesn't really matter what the logic is for the math. You guys are catching my drift. So I can go ahead and build that interface. And then you know what? Then I'm going to do a prompt, right? So that one will be a console write, right? And then what is that going to say? Choose your conversion type. And I'm also keeping the space at the end. And so here we go. Now you guys let me know. I have a tendency sometimes to go a little fast, and maybe I'm not going nearly fast enough, but I don't want to leave you behind as we're coding this either, right? Like if something's not working, or like, hang on a sec, it's okay to call out and just say so. That I'm fine with that. You guys all good? Okay. Could I run this program at this point? Sure, why not? I mean, it's not going to do anything, but I can at least see what it looks like. So I'm going to let it run, and I'm going to see if it, okay, enter amount in milliliters. All right, so I'll type, all right. Okay, then it put the rest of it up, and hey, it looks just like what we had. So we're okay. So I think we're at least on the right track. So we can say our user interface and menu options and screen interactions are mostly done. So now we need to capture, what are we capturing at this point? So this is kind of a fun one, actually. What are we capturing? What
If they type 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, we're expecting a single digit number being typed. Okay, so this is a really, really good question. We're allowing them to make a menu selection. So they're going to select from one of 4 things. We expect them to type in the number 1, 2, 3, or 4. When we capture that with a read line, what are we going to store it as and why? What's your thinking? Somebody give me a mindset.
Let's say an integer. Just because those are really the only choices that were presented to you.
Okay, right. So Alex is intelligently going, you know what? Those are numbers, right? So and they're counting numbers. Let's put them in an integer, right? Okay, so Alex, let me have you think about that for a second, right? Would that work? Sure, why not? Why wouldn't it work? We just have to convert it correctly. And then after we capture that integer, we can then write a series of if statements. I don't know if you guys have thought about this yet, but that's what's going to happen. That we're going to say if, you know, user selection is 1, if user selection is 2, if user selection is 3, etc., then perform this action, which will be a mathematical conversion and the displaying of a message. Right. So that would be kind of like the process. Does it matter if we're capturing what they typed as a number? Remembering that actually when people type anything at the keyboard, it actually comes in as a string. Couldn't I just check for it as a string? Or even more simplistically, a character? Interesting thought, right? There's a couple different ways to approach this. And I don't want to get overly complicated about it, but I kind of want to talk about a few of them. So one option would be to capture it as a number and react to it as a number. Simple, right? No double quotes needed. The other thought I'll have, though, very frankly, is if we are capturing the string really at the keyboard, why convert it? We can still check for that string as a segment or a character. So my thought is, do I capture it as a string or do I capture it as a character? And then what's the argument for one or the other? The expectation is a single character being typed, but, and devil's advocate here, what if the person hits one space enter very innocently, because people do that? Or what if people type, 11, they like hit the key twice by mistake instead of once and pressed enter, right? You could really look at, like, allow a string and then only look at the first position of the string to determine what their selection was, or you could brute force it to be a character. Now, I will tell you from the experience of programming, using the string approach is probably the safest for allowing for failure of the user entry. But it also indicates maybe, we don't have these tools available yet, really. What if they put in the wrong thing? So this is another conundrum. If the user types in the wrong choice, how do we handle that? So, okay, choose your conversion type, 1, 2, 3, or 4. 5, is what they press. What are we going to do with the 5? You guys feel where I'm going with this? So it doesn't really matter which of the approaches that we choose. I'm going to say that we stick with either a string or a car, and you can pick either one, by the way. And I think I'm going to go with a string, by the way, because, the other advantage of using a string is let's say they're reaching for the number 2, but it's right above the W key and they hit W by mistake because they just did it really fast. If I allow them to type a string and it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4, I can just simply put up an error message then, rather than that we're looking for an integer, they didn't type in an integer and you type the letter and the whole program will crash. So that's kind of the heads up I'm going to give you here. These are, of course, techniques you'll discover kind of as you go. But interesting thoughts, right? Like, all right, so let's set up a string. I want to do a little more basically there. And what are we going to call this? How about trace? Spelled the American way. And it's recommending console read line. Okay, that works for me. Now, why is it underlining green? It's the same thing we've been running into. Notice the suggestion to put in the question mark here. That will take care of the underline, just in case they don't type something. Is that a necessary step? No. Okay, so, let's go back to that. Is that really necessary? I don't know about you, but I prefer not to see underlines in my code. That's, that's my preference. This makes me feel a little better. All right. So now we have that set up and it's captured. And oh gosh, now what do we do? Well, now we have to do the logic part. So let's think about this. And I've noticed that a couple of you have been doing this in your coding, and I will tell you kudos for thinking about this. But most often when we think about like the systems process of input, processing, and output, I'm always a big fan where I can do inputs, because that's basically what this section is. And really truly, if we want to be more precise about it, user interfaces or user prompts So at this point, we're going to be moving to our next logical section of the program, which is the processing. Spell it correctly here, and I should hit the caps lock, but I'm holding on the shift key. So, all right, and this is where we pick things and process them. And we might also do the output at the same time. So we'll talk about that too as we go. But let's get the basic if statements in place. because what we're really going to process next is what their selection was. Right, so we have that captured under choice. So now we have to start writing an if statement that's going to react to their selection. So let's say if parens. All right, so I love what Visual Studio is doing here, and I'm just pausing here because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, like looking at the next PowerPoint slide, knowing what's coming next. But they're making this really interesting auto suggestion here, because this is really common in programming. As long as the choice is not null, we haven't even talked about that. Okay, so, and I'm going to have you think about this. If somebody types in the wrong thing, how are we going to handle it? Not typing anything is one of those things. Okay, so we really don't want to process any of the math if the choice is null. So we might have this really grand if statement here. And I will have you think about this as a large structure. If the choice is not null, meaning they actually typed in a number, then we're gonna look at it and process it as an if statement. So we will So we're going to put a nested if right in that position. And I'm putting in a comment first so I remember to do it, right? Also, to remind myself as to why, right? So if the choice is not null, I mean, meaning they type something, then we'll process it. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Well, I think it would be appropriate, or at least polite, to have a console write line, and I'm just going to let's put an error message on the screen here. And this is okay, so I just hit the run button, I think. Sorry. And let's just type a message, which will be the error, basically. And let's just say, nothing was entered. Program terminated. This is like way old school, right? Now, your brain should also tell you, like in the future, we will get to the point where we will start writing loops eventually, so that if a person doesn't put in the right entry, you give them another chance. Right now, that's not going to happen. If they don't put in the right thing, too bad. You know, sorry. Should have typed in the right thing. Right. So we're accommodating, really, think about this, for the error state first before we're writing all the rest of the code. All right, so now I'm going to leave my little directive here, but then I will delete this. And if you want to make a note to yourself, if this is helpful for you, consider doing something like this. Okay. That's the why we're putting it here. Now, let's backtrack a second here. Well, couldn't they also maybe enter the wrong stuff here? Yeah, I mean, we had the same kind of scenario here, don't we? All right, let's accommodate for it. And I think this will be a little bit fun to do this. So I'm going to say if milliliters is greater than 0. This is an auto suggestion once again from Visual Studio. Why would it suggest that? Now think about this. If they're not entering anything, so maybe it should be if milliliters is not equal to null. Was that a good idea? There's a reason why they're kind of having us do this, because we're converting to a number. All right, let's go with their suggestion. I think this is kind of an interesting suggestion. And let's think about the logic here. I mean, we're trying to set up a situation like this where we have kind of a way to check what they typed in and make sure that it's okay. Because if it's not okay, we may as well just end the program, really, right? Or will that happen? All right, so here's what I'm suggesting is we set up this if block, and if they put in a number that's greater than 0, then we run the menu, right? And then what'll happen is if they don't run the menu, they will never even get a chance to enter in the choice, right? And then we will pop out. Now, this is a red flag. It says choice does not exist in the current context, meaning it has not been declared yet. Now, we could declare it somewhere. So let's see the potential fixes. And they're showing us some really cryptic stuff here. Like we should use like Java and all this, all these like weird things. But really, what are they telling us? They're telling us that choice is a string that we're declaring here. But I have it inside of an if statement. And if the if statement doesn't execute, it should be 0. If the if statement doesn't execute, that will never get set. Okay. So see the process. Now I could fix that in a couple of different ways. One way would be I could preset this outside to nothing. So for example, way up here, and here's where I would normally do this. I would do this even above the user prompt, honestly. I would actually say string choice. Now this will throw an error, by the way, and just not put anything in it. Now this is telling you there's a mistake also. We're going to do it like this. So we're just going to declare it here just so we have it, not putting anything in it. What value is in there right now? Null is in there right now. There's nothing in there. It's null, right? It's the absence of something, right? And so this, yeah, it says choice may be null here, but that's okay. We're checking for null. See the logic there? We are checking for null. And if null happens, we'll process our math. If not, we give them a message and we're done. So I went, see how I'm kind of flowing through the program and I'm thinking about like what might happen before I even do my math. So let's continue forward. Now this is not really super happy about that, right? But it's a green line, not a red line, so I can kind of live with it. The red line here, yeah, that could be a problem, right? No, it won't. All right, so let's type in here now. Now we're going to come up with our logic, and this is where it gets fun, I think, right? Because this is where we do the heavy lifting. So we're going to look at choice. So we're going to say if choice equals, and actually we want to put this in parentheses, right? So if choice equal, thank you very much, Visual Studio. What am I looking for? 1. That's the first option, correct? If the choice is 1, we're going to do something. All right. See, I want to show you how I'm going to proceed here. Else, if the choice is 2, we're going to do something. Else, if the choice is 3, now notice I didn't even type the 3. Thank you, Visual Studio. You're awesome. Once again, I'm going to keep following this pattern. Else, if the choice is 4, and I just love how Visual Studio is just automatically doing it, right? This is like kind of like AI writing your code for you, by the way. It's not really truly AI, but it sure feels like it. Now we're going to say else, because what if they type something other than 1, 2, 3, or 4? Right. So else, then we'll have something like that, but I think it needs to be a little bit different message. How about that was not a correct option, program terminated. It's like, sorry, program's done. Goodbye. That's if they don't choose 1, 2, 3, or 4. We don't have a way for them to go back. They just have to start the program over again, unfortunately. Right. So here's our if structure. And I think the way that we can proceed here is to basically do all of the conversions, right? And how are we going to do the conversions? We're going to use basically these formulas or these numbers here, but we have to have the right math developed to do that. Now, you know what? That's already making my brain hurt, and we've been going almost for an hour. How about we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and then challenge our brains with math. Sound like a plan? All right, 5-minute break. It's 7:50. Let's call it 7:58, and come back at 8:03-ish. Okay, see you at 8:03. Pausing the recording. All right, so as we're coming back from the break, right? So like you get to like take a little bit of a brain break there. And I know that like sometimes this stuff is like, oh man, this seems really complicated and hard. But we do need to think about the math now. I think we got like a nice structure set up to succeed. And then we want to think about how we're gonna like do all this, and kind of solve this problem and make this a nice little working program. The one thing that I keep thinking about, and maybe your brain went here too, is if they're typing in milliliters, it's gonna convert to one of these other formats. So for example, the example that they're giving is if they type 75 milliliters, so let's just type that in. They're going to type 75 milliliters, and that converts it over to 0.079 quarts, right? And check it out, for an approximate result, thank you, Google, by the way, divide the volume value by 946.4. Does that correspond to the numbers I have in Visual Studio? Okay, well, I guess it depends on what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a quart, right? So for a quart, oh, so I should divide by this number. See what it's telling me, right? And isn't it interesting that they kind of rounded it to the same level? For an approximate result, divide the volume by 946.4. So what? Let's see. That would be for quarts. And so what if we're working with, what's the first thing on our menu? Teaspoons. So let's do teaspoons first so we can work top down through the code. But it says divide the volume value by 4.929. Is that kind of what we have here? 4.9. Okay. You know what? I think Google's probably pretty right. Let's go ahead and put that precision back in. It might be important for a teaspoon. All right. So that's the number I'm going to use to do my division. So I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to need to basically think about what it is I'm outputting here. What am I outputting? I'm going to output teaspoons, right? I mean, that's the thing I'm going to be outputting, and that's going to be a number, correct? And that number is probably going to be a decimal number, very likely going to be a decimal number. And I want it to be a decimal number on purpose. So I might create myself a double And I'm just showing you here that we could put it here, or we could put it somewhere else, but I'm gonna do it right here because I don't need to create it unless I need to. Right. And another technique was I can create this and put it up at the top and just set it to 0. That's one option. So, so double, and what are we gonna call this? Teaspoon? We could abbreviate, we could just do TSP lowercase. And then tablespoon could be like TBL or TBSP or something like that. All right, now we're not going to do this whole thing that they're recommending here, but what are we going to do? We're going to have to do some math, right? Could I do the math right away? And the answer is yes. So we're going to take what and divide it by 4.929. What are we going to do that math with? Just rush
Take
an
the amount
answer.
of milliliters that the user input.
So we're going to take the milliliters and divide by 4.929. That was the number we were given. Now, I'm just going to have you think about this as a thought. This conversion amount could be hard-coded somewhere, right? And then we could call it in as a variable. And I don't care which approach you use, right? If I did bring it in as a variable, then I would also ask the question, well, maybe it should be a constant because that's really a value that's never going to change because it's a conversion, right? I'm just going to hard code the number. We're going to use a literal. So this is a literal, floating point number. Will this math work out okay? I mean, that is a double. Notice when I hover over it. Well, that certainly is too. So it'll do the math just fine. Now, here's the next thing that we need to think about. Could I just do my output right here and just give them the message? Hey, you're right. We know what the output should look like. It should look sort of like this. Okay, whatever you typed in milliliters is whatever we calculated cups. Right, so that's kind of what our output should look like. All right, I think I got that in my head. So let's go ahead and put in the console write line. And then inside here, we're going to start by putting in the milliliter value, right? Whatever they typed in. So should I just type ML and then concatenate? Is that a wise choice? Can I just do this? What do you guys think? Would that work?
It would work. You could also interpolate the variable.
Okay. And how do we do interpolation again? We use what at the beginning of the statement?
It's $sign,
$sign.
just before the first double quotes.
All right. So I'm going to put in there and then
And curly brackets around any variable.
all right. Now, folks, this is the more modern kind of approach, right? And what we recommend, just generally speaking, because I think it's easier to build your phrasing that way. Because that way you're still inside double quotes. So I'm actually going to remove this plus sign here at the end. Let's see if we can just keep this flow going. So we're going to say whatever number milliliters they typed in. What's your phrasing? Is, so they've got to put the word is in there, space. And then whatever we calculated, which is going to be, in this case, TSP. Space, and then we should say teaspoons, right? Teaspoons, not tea sponges, teaspoons. Right. X milliliters is X teaspoons. And you know what? Do we do this? I don't know if it'll ever be singular. And then we also ask the question, Should we be formatting this maybe? I don't know. Let's just see how it turns out before we make a choice. Could we run the program and test this at this point? Right, as long as we don't choose any of the other options. Sure, why not, right? We could do that. All right, let's do that. Let's be brave. Let's hit the run button. I'm going to pull this up on the screen. Oh, there's build errors. Uh-oh. All right. No, we don't want to run the last successful build. So now we have to figure out what. Oh, we have the red underline. That's right. So how am I going to handle this situation then? This is a really weird one. What if I just set the choice to an empty string? What do you think about that? Does that get rid of the underline? Yes, it does. Okay, well, that begs a separate question. Will this condition ever hit? Okay, here's the answer. No, by the way. So as long as this choice is not empty, now see how I'm switching it? All right, so you guys making the same switch, hopefully. I'll give you a second to do that. All right, I think we're ready to run it now. I'm being brave. I'm hitting that run button. I'll move the console out of the way so you guys can still see everything. Enter amount in milliliters. I'm going to type 75. Choose your conversion type. And only one I have set up is teaspoons. Press enter. Is that correct? I don't know. Let's ask Google. All right. Yeah, it looks correct. And I'm always a huge fan, by the way. Always validate that your math is working right. And whenever you're doing a conversion like this, I mean, Google's got I mean, it just works right in your search engine. I mean, how awesome is that, really? You know, that's why you can like talk to your phone and ask it, hey, Google, how many milliliters are in a cup? And or Siri, whatever, you know, whoever you're.
One cup is equivalent to 236.588 milliliters.
Did you guys catch that? My phone just talked to me. Hey, Google, when are the Packers playing this weekend?
The Packers will be playing the Rams on Sunday at noon.
What will the weather be on Sunday? Hey, Google, what will the weather be on Sunday?
It'll be mostly cloudy with a high of 55 and a low of 48.
Hey, Google, can you stop listening to me?
I'm designed.
Okay, Google was about to give me their pat answer. I'm designed to listen whenever you say that phrase. So, all right, let's go ahead. And since we've had success with one, now we have a pattern to follow for the rest, correct? Let's just follow that same pattern. So we'll set up a double for each one of these. This one, choice 2, is going to be tablespoon. So we'll call that TBSP. Does that seem good? Or TBLSP? Maybe that's better. TBLSP. There's actually a convention in cooking where if it's lowercase TSP, it's a teaspoon. If it's an uppercase TSP, it's actually a tablespoon. That's how they formally do it. I'm not good with that though. So that's why I'm doing it like this. And we're gonna, once again, all of them are going to be milliliters divided by, and I think we've already proved that all the numbers that we have up here are probably good, but let's validate what they do for tablespoon. So let's switch it to tablespoon, and they're saying 14.787. So they're putting the precision back in. I have no reason not to follow that. All right, so you guys are like, wait, but you made us change it. Yeah. Oh well. Google's talking back to me. I gotta listen. So let's get that down at the bottom of the program here. So let's just paste that number in, semicolon. Now let's do our right line. And we can keep the first part, right? Now we just have to change our variable. And I want, here's kind of a really interesting effect. Why is this one color coding and this one not? I notice what it says is an error. Does not exist in the current context, meaning it's not within this set of curly brackets where it's defined. So this one cannot see that one, but there is a logic here. I don't want to create a variable that takes up memory unless I need to. Right? Yeah, that's the why. So we got to put in a TBLSP. Now it's matching up. And I like how it highlights like that because you can see that it's in scope. All right. Now normally I would stop here, run the program, test that one, etc. But I'm just going to keep going because I think I got the pattern. So next one would be, I think, cups and then quarts. So we'll do cups, ml, divide by, all right, let's go back and just do it like this again. Okay, so there's a legal cup and a cup. I don't even want to know, right? There's a legal cup, a cup, you know, an imperial cup. Who came up with this stuff, by the way? 236.6 is our divisor. Is that what we rounded to before? I think so. Right, that one we did round to that amount. So they're saying that's enough. Thanks, Google. All right, let's copy the console right line. Here we're going to switch this one to cups. We have another one to do here. This is going to be a double. And we're going to do what now? Quarts. We'll say ML divide by whatever. And let's 946.4. 946.4. We will paste that same right line. Just change the variable here. Oh, I see another mistake I made here. I don't know if you guys caught it yet. Wait, so this really should say quarts, cups, there we go. How's that? Better? All right. And I think, you know, if I'm correct, I think we're done. This is the end of our exercise. Now, how long did that take us? That's like an hour plus, right? About an hour to do this one, right? Not unusual for writing code, by the way, especially if you're doing it correctly and you're thinking about it. So let's go ahead and save this. I did do a control S. I hope you guys have figured out anytime you hit that run button, first it saves your code, right? And then it builds it and runs it. So let's go ahead and run. Let's see how it goes. All right. Enter amount in milliliters, 75 milliliters. And we're going to convert to, we already did teaspoons, right? So now we're going to try tablespoons. Okay. So once again, we'll go back here. Is that the correct number? That is the correct number. Looks good. Let's hit the key. Let's run it again. Let's try a different number this time. Let's put in, we're going to try cup. So actually, let's do 75 because that's what the original example was in the lab, right? And 0.3. Yeah, I guess we should probably maybe think about formatting this. And you know what, if I was really persnickety about it, I would say, yeah, absolutely, it should be formatted. Since we're all coding together, I think I'm okay with it just kind of being like this. 0.3. All right. Run again. Let's try quarts. Let's do like 750 mil. We'll do quarts. Let's check it. .79. 0.79. Looks like our math is all working good. Here's what we haven't tried though, right? Devil's advocate. What if we, yeah. All right. What if I don't enter anything here? We haven't tried that scenario, have we? Okay. Didn't like it. Where did it stop? Input string was not in correct format. I typed nothing. So here's what's happening with that. This isn't being set unless the user types something in. Maybe that's not wise. Maybe the smarter play is to take this declaration, put it up here, and let's preset it to 0. Sure, why not, right? Then, of course, we don't need to declare it as a double here because we're just going to utilize it. And I'm wondering if that will fix our problem. Shall we test it? Sure, let's test it. Here it comes. All right. Hoping for good things. All right. Still a problem. Input string was not in correct format. What do I do to fix this, folks? Is there anything I can really do? There's not really anything I can do. Here's what's kind of happening here. This scenario doesn't really necessarily work because when we're typing this in, this cannot store in there because when I press enter, that's really still a string, right? That's what happening. So I'm trying to convert that to a double, but it's empty. Maybe all of this stuff here is kind of useless until I can introduce this other concept that we haven't reached yet called exception handling, where things aren't put in correctly. We haven't learned those techniques yet. That's the unfortunate part of it. That will come down the line. So what we're going to have to do is just allow the user to crash the program at this point. That's frustrating. It is. But here's the grand part about it. We will eventually learn how to do it. So let's run it and let's put in 0. And they're seeing this as nothing was entered. Yeah, I guess so. I guess nothing was entered. Right. We aren't setting it up to succeed with a key press though. Like if they just press enter, there's a whole different process that has to happen. What we could do, and I'm just going to have you guys think about this, right? And some of you may have like thought this out in your brain already. I'm just going to do this like goofy thing here. This is kind of me, right? But maybe instead of converting here, maybe we just let it capture a string. And then instead of checking if it's greater than 0, we'll check to see if they actually entered something valid and then pop them out if not. So let me just kind of follow through the screen here. So I'm going to say string, and what would we call this? Milliliter prompt or something like that. That's what I'm going to call mine. Okay. And here, of course, it doesn't like it once again, just in case. Question mark, that should get rid of that. Right. We don't need to do a conversion here. The conversion will happen below. So we're going to cut. So I think that will handle the issue of if they enter nothing. Right. Now we have to process that here. So we're going to say the milliliter prompt, but what are we going to be looking for instead? We're going to be looking for some sort of a valid entry. Could I just leave my logic alone here? All right, you know what? Let's try it with leaving the logic alone. I'm just going to have you think about this for a second. Let's try it. The proof is in the pudding, right? Pressing enter, still popping out right at the same spot. Yeah, that approach is just not going to work. So it really kind of what I'm taking it down this like weird pathway here to kind of have you think about these situations, because there are tools and mechanisms for solving these problems. And once again, we haven't reached them. So what I'm going to implore you to do is just hope they type in the right thing. That's the unfortunate reality. So we're going to run this menu no matter what. We're going to go back to what we had before. Let's hope they type the right thing. I'm control Zing my way out. Are you guys catching this? We still don't want to declare that there though. Or could we declare it here because it doesn't make a difference if we declare it up here or not? Let's try this now. Let's just type in any number. Now what we're going to test, by the way, is we're going to test that second setup. So I'm just typing in numbers. I'm going to test each one of the menus. I think we already tested this just fine. And if you're catching what I'm doing here, all right, I think I've already proved that all those things work. So if I put in whatever number, it's just going to work. But what if here I type in the number 5? Okay, so that one's working just fine. What if I type in something other? So if I type in a number here. What if I type in? Okay, so that one's working just fine. You guys catching that? That's okay. A few different things that we could do ultimately. And you know what? I know that if some of you sat down and thought about this long enough, you can probably find a clever way to work around the issue that we're having. But the main part of the program is working, and I consider it a success. So if you turned in code like this that works, I would be very happy with it. Now, can I ask this question? I think there was at least a couple of people that already attempted this. Did anybody already attempt and finish this that wants to share? Carly, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so we're looking at this module 2 assignment here, and I've put all of you guys into breakout rooms at this point, so that's why there's only one face probably in the recording right now. Let's read through this module 2 assignment, and then I will, just to have like a preface to this, and then after everybody comes out of the breakout rooms, we'll look at the solution to this too. It says you're hosting a surprise birthday party for a friend and you want to hire a local restaurant to cater it. You send out invitations to the attendees and ask them for their dietary restrictions. Write a program that helps you decide which restaurants you can order from. Here's a list of available restaurants and their dietary accommodations. So Thunder Bay, Marco's, Cafe Mana, India Kitchen, Harvest Cafe, etc. And then listing of whether they're vegetarian, vegan, or gluten-free. And I want you to notice that with each of these, it's yes or no, right? Because it's either true or not, right? And there's kind of a little bit of a clue that those might be things that you might use Boolean values for, possibly, right? But this chart will help you to decide, because for some, if you have dietary restrictions, it is a very serious thing, right? So you want to make sure that people get the right thing. It says at the bottom of that table, it says, no, people without a certain dietary restriction may still eat at restaurants that accommodate that restrictions. In other words, if no guests report any restrictions, then all 5 restaurants would be acceptable to order from. Okay, so that's kind of a no-brainer. Now we have a sample output here. And it says, after your program runs, the console should look similar to the following example. The exact output will vary depending on the user inputs. All right, so then you're going to prompt first, is anyone attending the party a vegetarian? Yes or no? All right, you're going to capture that character. Is anyone attending the party a vegan? Yes or no? You will capture that character. Is anyone attending the party gluten-free? Same thing, yes or no? You will capture that character at the end. And then what it will do is it will put out a listing. You may order from the following restaurants, and it lists them. So there is, for example, in this case, the person's vegetarian, vegan, and gluten-free, right? And so there's going to have to be some if statements here that check, what the scenarios, and then you're going to have to figure out the logic on this. But are there any restaurants that are all 3? Well, it looks like, Cafe Mana is one of them, and the Harvest Cafe accommodates all 3. Right. And so what we're really looking for is for you to build the if statements that will give you the right output based on the input. So you have 3 criteria you're going to check. And then depending on that combination of the 3 criteria, then you will have basically the capability of outputting what the correct restaurants are. You will use this chart to help you with that output. All right, so that's the challenge, and everybody right now is in the breakout rooms working on this. So they're not actually even listening to me about it. So they're going through this process, or you are going through this process right now to try to figure this out. What I'm going to do in the interim is I'm going to start building the solution here. I'm going to pause the video to do it, by the way. I'm going to start building the solution, and then when the class is all done doing this, we're going to take a look at how far they got and how far I got in the process. We don't have a lot of time. It's like under an hour, but we're hoping that, at least a majority of this program will be written. All right, so here's what I did for my solution. I started out by just getting the console prompts typed in, and I just copy pasted them in. And I originally did just a console read line and drop stuff into a string variable to capture it with the question mark, so it doesn't give me error messages. And then I realized, what, they could type either an uppercase or lowercase y. So I did this conversion down here originally. And then I'm like, what, that's silly. That's a waste of space on the page. So then I just appended, because I remembered that, oh, you can just do this, right? So right as they're typing it in, you can convert it, and you got to choose one, either all lowercase or all uppercase. I went with lowercase because I figured that's more kind of the de facto standard. The next thing I did is, once I captured that, converted it all to lowercase, I put this message on the screen, because that's going to happen either way, right? That's at the top of the output. No reason to do it multiple times in an if statement when I can just do it once here. Then I transported myself and did some logic. And before, I talked through this logic here, by the way, some people will have the assumption that yes and no sounds like true and false, and I should convert that to Boolean. So maybe, and I'm just putting it out there, maybe you guys did that. You took the Y or the N and maybe even wrote an if statement that was like, if capital Y or lowercase y, then vegan Boolean equals true, for example, and that might have been how you proceeded. That's up to you, right? There's nothing wrong about that. I think it's a little inefficient. Now, the table that you were given was a clue, right? And so let's see if I can pull that back up here, because really what we're asking is, you know, if somebody asks is vegetarian, so we would get an N, an N, and an N. Well, the only place that they could eat is Thunder Bay Grill. So I could ask one question that was, if veggie is an N and vegan is an N and gluten-free is an N, right? In a compound if statement, right? With an and double ampersands in between, then Thunder Bay Grill would be the only restaurant you could eat at. All right. So looking at that chart and just stepping through the chart methodically from top to bottom, I put in all the yeses and nos just the way they were in the chart. So I did no, 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 and the only option is Thunder Bay Grill. I want you to notice I did do a tab. So I did escape sequence tab to bump it in so it looks like the screen that they presented in the assignment, right? Then the next thing I did is the next line was yes, no, yes. So I did yes, no, yes. And that only possibility is Marco's Pizza. It's the only one with that option. Then we went to the next option, which was yes, yes, yes. But I'm noticing there's two of them that have yes, yes, yes. So the output on that one is Cafe Mana and Harvest Cafe, just like the sample in the assignment screen. If you look, you know, down here, it's exactly the output. So there, in that case, there were two restaurants to output, right? If you look at the chart again, then there's another option. This is yes, no, no is one of the options. And that would lead to yes, yes, no, no leads to India Kitchen. All right, so that covers all the scenarios in the table. However, here's the other thing. And so I kind of put this at the bottom here. This is the kind of like the sneak reveal or something, but most of you will have missed this one for sure. You know, it takes kind of like a logical person to go, you know what, there's one other option that we're not being shown here. If you look at that table, there's nothing in the table where it could be no, no, yes. But somebody might not be a vegetarian or vegan and might be gluten-free. That's actually very common, you know. So I eat dairy, you know, I'm not a vegetarian, I do eat meat, but I am gluten-free, right? So that option's not represented in the table. But if you do your little thinking about it, if my only limitation is gluten-free, then I actually have 3 restaurants I can choose from. And so I did this entry: Marco's Pizza, Cafe Mana, and Harvest Cafe would work for the person that answered that. Now, most of you will miss that one. And if you did, no problem. And I put a comment in there to that effect. Right. And then I did one other option, which was, okay, well, maybe, you know, whatever they typed either wasn't the right letters. Maybe they typed an errant letter. And I'm just going to give them a message. Maybe you should just consider making something at home. You know, right? Because you know, yes or no, X, you know, for example, right? So that's the possibility. Now, I am going to pause the recording here. And I know that you guys all have your own answers on this, and I'm not going to record those answers into the video, but I think it's kind of fun to share them if you guys want to. If you don't, you know, we are at time, you know, so you guys need to go, just go. But if you want to hang out and show me what you guys did, hey, let's just take a really quick look. I'll stop the screen share. Feel free to share. And I will, let me stop the recording first though.